Hello, and welcome to today's program, Building Dynamic Collaborative Teams. My name is Ethan Chazen. I am an executive coach and organizational development empowerment trainer. So let's dive right into today's topic. So, how do you build an effective collaborative team? Or even at a more fundamental level, why would you go about that? Well, we know in the 21st century that teams and work are all about sharing and working together. So we are now effectively in the environment of collaborative workplace communities. And therefore, the days of individuals controlling, owning, keeping information to themselves and divulging it on a need to know basis for their own personal advancement, that is so very 20th century. Instead, the 21st century, driven by millennials and Gen Z workers, is about getting together in groups and achieving amazing results. Why is that also an important consideration working collaboratively in the 21st century? Because the access to information, the sheer volume of information that's readily available, that can be acted upon, demands that you empower individuals in highly functioning teams to work together and strip out, get rid of all of that inherent 20th century command control, bureaucratic layers of hierarchical reporting to allow individuals to frame who they work with, how they do the work, when they do the work, and where they do the work. And all successful organizations understand this. And they've been doing this actually for some time, actually decades. The question is, are you and your organization prepared to unleash the untapped potential that comes from collaborative work teams? So, further justification for why you want to go about building an incredibly powerful team is the justification, the rationale for team as a work construct. So, first of all, we understand that building a diverse team with different individuals from different backgrounds, skill sets, means that you are exponentially increasing the characteristics, the qualities, the capabilities that those team members bring together to achieve work. Different people have different perspectives, different outlooks, different viewpoints. You want to not only not limit those, you want to maximize those. And nothing works better than a truly empowered collaborative team. Also, you want individuals who not only are not afraid to have constructive conflict, but who understand and are coached and trained to use conflict creatively so you maximize divergent viewpoints into a collaborative work setting. In fact, in my consulting practice, I do a lot of work with getting teams to, with civility and respect, challenge each other to push themselves and the team farther along than they would if they all just went along with the proverbial groupthink mentality. Collaborative teams also give your people an opportunity to have more experience working with more individuals across the spectrum, across the functional areas of your enterprise, so that you can cultivate more meaningful relationships as opposed to keeping them in their respective silos. Things that are called functions like HR, finance, operations, marketing. Also, by creating collaborative work teams, what you're doing is you're enculturating an environment of coaching, mentoring, and learning from one another. And so these are just a few of the high level benefits that accrue to you and your organization from building collaborative teams. So you build a team, and a team is comprised of members. Now, who sits in that team? Well, ideally, your organization is an amalgam, a collection of project based teams, but here are the players on your team. There's a team lead. That individual has responsibility and ownership of reporting the team's success and sharing the team's needs, desires, and resource allocation requirements with your senior leadership team. There's typically somebody who serves in a formal, if not informal, facilitation role. They're the one individual from a personality construct type who tends to get along with multiple personalities, and they tend to want to facilitate relationship cultivation. So that's the facilitator. The recorder is the tracker. Now, most organizations have work team project workflow apps and software systems and processes to provide that role of recording. But the recording is the capturing of conversations, collaborative work, versions, trial and error, customer inputs. So all of those data sets that required aggregation and then formalized reporting, that's the recording role or function. The timekeeper, again, this is in many organizations, the timekeeping workflow tracking has been captured by automated systems processes, but the timekeeper role is project management. It's looking at all the component tasks of the team's work, identifying start and end dates, where you are relative to your project scope, prioritization of the tasks, who owns the tasks, who contributes to the task, because that's the timekeeper or workflow. And then everybody, ostensibly everybody, including all the roles I previously mentioned, they serve another role, and that is to be contributing members of the team. So now that we've kind of framed the rationale for why you want to build a collaborative team, and we walked through the composition, the roles that are served, I want to walk you through some of the characteristics of a high functioning team. And if you're the kind of person like I am who likes to keep track of things in terms of acronyms, I want to share with you the PERFORM model of highly functioning team characteristics. So what does PERFORM directionally dictate? PERFORM starts with a shared sense of purpose or cause. It also includes empowerment. A big part of PERFORM is the relationship. So that's the R in PERFORM, relationships, and therefore the communication amongst relationships. Flexibility for each member of the team and members working within that team construct. O, optimal performance. The whole rationale for highly collaborative teams is optimizing individual and team-based performance. So that's the O. The R is the requisite recognition and appreciation that your organization should be doing on a fundamental basis, but more formally within teams and team dynamic. M, morale. What we know is that individuals, especially millennials and Gen Zs, are driven by an almost pathological need to want their team to be successful. That creates empowerment and a high level of employee morale. So let's walk through this in a little bit more detail. Purpose, the P in PERFORM. It's that shared sense of mission dedicated to a cause, whether it's project basis like the rollout of a new product, whether it's an upgrade in service offerings, whether it's a project in terms of engaging your organization in its communities it serves, but there's a central sense within the team of a cause. We're in it together. Goals are clear, clearly communicated. Challenges are dealt with individually, but also amongst team and sub-teams within the bigger team. And there's this notion of we as a team are relevant as a team because we're all working together towards achievement of a goal. And then the strategies around the achievement of the goal are much more salient. They're a lot clearer when everybody understands our vision, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And also, another desirable outcome of having a really strong sense of team-based purpose is individuals within the team understand what their roles are. Their roles as contributing members of the team, but also the tasks associated with them owning their piece of work and contributing to the team's work. That's the purpose. Next up is the empowerment aspect of team, highly functioning team characteristics. Because the member of the team feels a part of the team and is empowered to do their best work, they have this sense of personal gratification that comes from working in the team and achieving results as a contributing member of the team. There's an implicit contract going on here. Now, I understand that the notion of employee-employer contract has been marginalized in the last few decades because employees are seen to be more disposable by organizations. However, there's an implicit sense of ownership as a team member, each individual and collectively. You have the skills, the training, the resources, everything you need as an individual to be successful in the team. That's empowerment. Also, here comes a really big organizational component of this. Does your organization create, communicate, enforce policies and procedures that allow employees to control their work? Anecdotally, through my 12 years of coaching and consulting with over 500 organizations, I'm going to tell you most organizations do not do this well. They don't set up their culture, their informal culture, to facilitate through their policies, procedures, hiring practices. They don't facilitate true employee empowerment. So that's a tremendous opportunity for your organization to rethink how it incentivizes employees to work effectively in teams. But there's another piece of empowerment, and it is working on a team should foster a sense of shared respect and a willingness to help each other out. Now, this gets back to your human resources and talent acquisition, because the question is, are you hiring individuals who share those certain soft skills or professional skills where they've exhibited, these employees who are being hired into your organization, prior track record of success, being willing to help others? And that takes a rare kind of individual that you need to formalize your hiring processes around. So we've got the P and the E in the perform. Now we go to the R, relationship cultivation. Members within the team must feel safe and secure that they can convey their feelings, their thoughts, their ideas, that their voice is heard, whether they're extroverted, introverted, regardless of their background and the level of diversity they bring to the table. They have to feel like they can have honest, sometimes maybe challenging conversations with each other. It doesn't have to get to confrontation, but they have to feel a sense of safety in the team. And that comes from the team lead, encouraging that. There needs to be a base level of understanding and acceptance amongst the team. And as your organization creates these empowered collaborative teams, active listening, that's not an easy skill. And so you as the leader in your team and the organization as a whole, through hiring people into your organization who share these skills, they have to be almost along the lines of a servant master. They want to serve and work with others and help others, no doubt. But they also have to demonstrate that they possess soft skills, the non-technical skills that fall under effective communication. And a big piece of that is active listening. And also that you encourage as a team lead and your organization encourages throughout your company that differences of opinion, background, experience, perspective, critical thinking, problem solving, that they're not only characteristics that you want to solicit, that you actively pursue them and encourage and recognize and reward them. So here we go. The F in perform is flexibility. Flexibility means a lot of different things. So I just want to frame this for you as a prevailing characteristic. Members perform different roles, right? We know this. That's what your job title and job descriptions are for. However, you want to think about the tremendous benefit of unleashing your employees' untapped potential by training, developing them to take on additional skills. We know that a relatively small amount of each employee who works in your organization, a relatively small amount of their skills, experience, is actually being leveraged. So what you want to do is conduct a workforce audit to take a look at each employee in each department, in each functional area, in each location of your entire enterprise, and see what are the skills that they're being tasked with using in their role in your organization. But even more powerful, what are the additional skills, characteristics, learning, education, cultural diversity, volunteer work? What are the other things that maybe you didn't initially leverage when you hired them in? Also, because of doing this kind of hiring to find people who are flexible and adaptive and do well in undefined roles and are intrinsically motivated and they don't need external motivation, they're driven, they drive themselves. These are the kinds of individuals who can adapt constantly to change and chaos and uncertainty. And that's also a prerequisite for individual team member flexibility. They have to be naturally curious and they have to want to learn as a lifelong learner. So that's some of the inherent characteristics around individual and team-based flexibility. So would you want, if you think about it, yourself, pardon me, yourself as a member of a team, or yourself bringing employees into your organization, do you want individuals who are technically adept in one skill, one functional area, or would you want a group of generalists who may not be expert in any one particular area, but who have diverse backgrounds? Because that's how most organizations, that I've done consulting with in human capital management and talent acquisition, they tend to hire on either of those spectrums. They want technical perfectionists, experts, or they want adaptive, generalists. There's another aspect of that. And that is individuals who may have expertise or skill in certain areas, but are naturally curious and are constantly looking to develop themselves. So there's a commingled third approach. So far we have the PERF. So now the O in perform is optimal productivity. And I'm going to talk in a little bit about the stages of team build. At a certain point in constructing and running a team for the duration of a project, when your team achieves optimal productivity. Point is, how do you increase the productivity or maximize it at every stage of the team's functional life together? And how do you identify individuals who tend to work extremely well together, irrespective of project scope? And how do you get them together again and again on multiple projects, because you know that they've established a track record of success in output because they work well together from a process perspective. So we'll talk more about that. The R in perform is recognition, reward, appreciation. Every human being, regardless of background, where they came from, upbringing, familial input, every individual thrives in an environment, an organizational environment in which their work individually and as part of a team is recognized and appreciated by each other in a team and from the organization as a whole. You want your team accomplishments to be recognized throughout your organization, and you want the individuals who achieve success to be recognized. And you would think this is a no-brainer. But I found anecdotally, subjectively in my consulting practice, most organizations don't create systemic process and culture characteristics that reward and recognize. And invariably, when I'm talking to a business owner or a senior level executive, and I'm talking about formalizing the recognition and appreciation aspects of organizational culture, they'll say invariably some permutation of, well, my people are recognized every 2 weeks when I give them their pay. That does not motivate employees. It doesn't keep your rising stars in your organization. And understand, we may be in the midst of a global pandemic, but as the economy evolves, it comes back to some semblance of its prior functional working. Those rising stars who thrive on recognition and appreciation will leave you in a heartbeat. So it's recognition and appreciation, an incredibly valuable strategy for retaining your rising stars and your top talent. It's a way of making your teams as a whole and individuals as part of your teams, they feel respected. They feel a part of a cause bigger than themselves. Remember, P in perform is purpose. Team and individual contributions are valued. And that's a big word, valued by the organization. Morale, the M in perform, the last characteristic that are needed for highly functioning teams. There's a spirit of esprit de corps. We're in it together. We see the shoreline, we are in the boat together, and we're rowing together, synchronized to achieve the purpose of reaching that goal or that shoreline. We feel good about the people who are on board in the boat with us. We're confident. We understand the challenges, and we know that we're motivated to achieve success as we've identified it. And we've also been empowered, encouraged, incentivized, appreciated. All those words have meaning when it comes to motivating your people towards a heightened sense of collective and individual morale. Morale is a shared sense of mission and a spirit towards achievement of goals, accomplishment of tasks. We're in it together. We have each other's back. So having said that, we understand that the group functions, your group of individuals, the team, ideally optimized at 8 to 12 individuals or no more than 15 max. But we know the group interaction happens at two levels. The first is the work aspect. That's what we call content in a team construct. That's the what needs to be done and the ownership of tasks, the delegation of the work. So that's the first piece, is the content. The second is process. How does the work get done? How does the team function? I just want to point out, the reason I put this slide in is there's two pieces to process. The first is, how does the work get done in terms of within the team functioning in part of your organization? And that's dictated by your informal culture. There are two kinds of organizational culture. One is what's called formal. That's aspirational. It's what the organization wants to believe it feels like to work there. It's your marketing spin, what your senior executives say about it, what your HR department says during initial interviews. It may or may not have any basis in reality. So that's the formal culture. The informal culture is what drives team performance in your company, in your organization. So the informal culture is what it actually feels like for your employees to work there, whether it's virtual, whether they are asked to come into the office as essential personnel during COVID, doesn't matter. The how work gets done is driven by the informal culture. The second part of process is how the work gets done based on the leadership of the facilitator. And so my question, a rhetorical question for you to take away from today, is how does your organization institute best practice around training, education of your team-based leaders? How do you create an informal culture of genuine, effective leadership? And that's something that directly impacts process. And then it also comes back, leadership, to the content area of group interaction in terms of the leader's job as being the chief facilitator officer of the task completion. So having said that, what are you looking for? Here's what we look for. Here's what I look for as a consultant. Here's what effective organizations look at in terms of team dynamic. You make sure that at every stage of the team, and we're going to talk about the team stages next, but in every stage, communication is fully engaged and there's optimal democratic participation. Decision-making is dispersed amongst team members. There's no such thing as that 20th century pyramid command control where decision-making is top-down edicts. It's not top-down. It's amongst the team. Conflict is not only not to be avoided, but conflict is to be managed constructively. Meaning you want people to have oppositional viewpoints and take a Socratic method to argue for the merits of one decision or one process, to argue against it, and then ideally you have those people who are for try to argue against, and those people who are against try to argue for. But conflict is a positive when managed well. Leadership. None of this works. None of this thing called collaborative team building works without genuine leadership. And another rhetorical for you to take away is, do you truly have effective leadership that's enculturated into your organization? Goals, are they articulated? Are they achievable? Are they measurable? Do you have metrics to determine success or benchmark how you're doing relative to status in terms of completion of goals over a period of time? Also, do you have roles that are clearly identified? This is key. Roles are key. Every person needs to know what their set of responsibilities are and how they fit into the team. Norms. Norms are just a standard way of behaving in a team. Have you documented them? Have you documented in your industry and in your workflow and in your organization, what are the effective norms that lead to optimal outcomes vis-a-vis working well together and achieving goals as part of a collaborative team? Problem solving. How do you enculturate or create as part of your culture a workforce of problem solvers who are inherently curious, inquisitive, who pursue lifelong learning, who love to solve challenges or problems or puzzles? That problem solving is a characteristic that you should be infusing into your organization's informal culture through hiring, talent acquisition, best practices. Climate, setting the tone. That actually comes from your team leaders. And how do they do this? So here we go. Coming together is just the beginning of the team. Keeping together is process. It requires significant time and effort. Working together is a successful outcome. That's the team. So now I want to introduce you to, I'm really excited to introduce you to the 5 stages of team building according to Bruce Wayne Tuckman, who is one of the collective godfathers of collaborative team building. So these 5 stages are part of any team in any industry, from any size firm, from startup to partners cocktail napkinning, a business model, to organizations with hundreds of thousands of employees, for-profit, nonprofit, government entity, doesn't matter. This is the universal process of 5 stage of team development. So we understand in the first stage, there's what's called forming or orientation. We're getting the team together. This is a scary, frantic attempt, even when well managed, to get a group of individuals into a team and start to get them going down the road together. So individuals in this first stage of the 5-stage team building construct are incredibly anxious. People meet each other. The leader's role is critically important because everybody has uncertainty. Uncertainty how? They're uncertain about their role. They're uncertain about each other. They may have never worked together. They may not understand who owns what tasks. There may be different backgrounds where people are confrontational or talking through each other, or there's confrontation. This is where the leader has to lead, because this is the first stage for sure, but it's also the most critical stage, as it has a direct bearing on every other stage that this team goes through, being successful or unsuccessful. So you get a bunch of superheroes together, a bunch of people with these tremendous powers, survival instincts, who worked well individually. Now you're bringing them into a team and you're saying, okay, you individuals on this team are going to work together. Good luck with that. So that's the first stage. You came together, the forming stage. Now, stage 2 is the storming stage. There's a significant amount of uncertainty, inherent dissatisfaction. That's just human nature. You cannot say, I will remove this step. It's part of every team's organic life cycle development. So what happens in stage 2? People have different ideas how they're going to complete their tasks. They see the goal, you've communicated the goal as the leader, but people are resistant. They're starting to work together, and it's like 2 partners or more learning a new dance routine. One leans in, the other should lean back, but they both lean in, they smack their heads. So that's analogous to the creation or the storming. A lot of different conflict arises. Egos are not entirely in check because it's human nature to question each other when you're put into a team, even with exceptional leadership. So the leader's role, and I talked about roles earlier, in stage 2 is facilitator. This is where the label leader as facilitator comes from. The effective resolution of conflict, not to avoid conflict, but to facilitate the constructive resolution of oppositional viewpoints with people who may be proud, they're successful independently, they're self-motivated. Now you have to change that dynamic from a me to a we. So that's stage 2. You're building your superhero team. You're facilitating it. So now we get to stage 3. And so things are a little different now than the first 2 stages. There's a normalization process. People are resigned to the fact that they're working together. They have norms or operational strategies or blueprints. They have policies, procedures. They know each other a little bit better now. It's a normalization. As people get through those initial phases of uncertainty and doubt and conflict, and now they're moving towards working instead of opposed to one another, as conjointly. They're working with each other. And there's no science to this. At different industries and different sectors and different organizations, these stages happen at different levels. But nonetheless, Bruce Wayne Tuckman, the beauty of this model, it is as universal application. because all humans are identical, regardless of background, culture, upbringing, when it comes to being infused or incorporated into a team dynamic. So stage 3 is a normalization process. You're starting to see relationships be cultivated, not just collectively as a whole of that team, but within the team, power groups. So if a team is 8 to 12 employees on a team, you have 2 or 3 in power groups who are working on different pieces of the overall scope of work. They're doing different projects, they're doing different tasks. So people are now normalized in their relationship cultivation. It's not anymore about what's my piece of contribution, it's how do I help each other. People are not only looking in their work, but they're looking over their work to each other and identify opportunities to help where appropriate. And that's a normal phase of human team build collaborative work. So they're becoming de facto workplace friends, if they weren't already part of relationships with their team members outside of this team construct. They're becoming stronger members working together. So now we get from the prior stage of people normalizing their relationship and normalizing their workflow. Now you get to an area of high achievement. When we talked, I mentioned earlier that performance, productivity in the Perform model. This is the level of heightened performance. This is where it all starts to come together. People are producing at an optimal level. They're producing individually, they're producing as part of, in their power group of sub-team, they're performing as a whole. They need very little guidance from their leader. The leader goes from prior stages of being the facilitator or the conflict resolution negotiator. Now the leader is going back to the senior leadership team, and the leader is saying, we need additional resources. We're now in sync, we're working at maximum purpose and shared sense of mission. We need additional organizational support to continue putting the wind in the sails of us navigating these choppy waters to reach the other shore. So this is where the leader can take a back seat and come backwards a little bit, because the team is performing at such a heightened sense of functional ability. Even when disagreements arise, the team members typically can resolve that conflict working through this relationship cultivation that they've created through the first 3 stages leading up to the performance stage. And that's how you know you've got a highly well-functioning team. And then the final stage, which may not be the final stage, that's the teaser. The adjourning stage is completion of the team's collective set of goals. Everything is completed. You can do a debrief, whatever you call it, or reconvene to get back together to assess what worked, what would you have done differently, what would you do more of. You document those processes, those learning outcomes. You socialize that with the powers that be up the organizational food chain, but the team disbands. And I said this may be the last stage, or it may not be. There's a supplemental 6th stage that Bruce Wayne Tuckman talked about, and that's reforming. Meaning if the team works so well collaboratively together, you should institutionalize that team as a weapon to be repurposed. So you put in your leadership team tool belt, and then you remember that this team comprised of these individuals worked really well together. And you try to the extent possible to recreate the magic, meaning reallocate these effective team members. It's what organizations like Disney and Pixar and Whole Foods and General Electric and DuPont and et cetera, they all do. They institutionalize highly functioning teams to have multiple maximum opportunities to work together. So the 6th stage is called reforming. So what's the point of all this? With the Bruce Wayne Tuckman model as our guide, as our kind of blueprint for success, no stage is bad. And certainly no stage is to be avoided, because those 5 stages are fundamental underpinnings of the life cycle of a truly empowered team. We understand it's about the journey of those individuals working amongst the team and working together to optimize their collaborative team productivity. So never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. There's power in the team. And the organization, your institution, your company, your government, whatever it's referred to, your nonprofit, there's power in people working effectively together. They want to work effectively together. More often than not, the hindrance to people working collaboratively to be productive It's institutionalized dysfunction as part of your informal culture. That prevents people from working well together. So we need to re-architect the organizational culture to optimize individual and team-based productivity. And so what does that mean? Certain organizations for decades have been running highly well-functioning teams. The American workplace has evolved from an industrial to a post-industrial workforce driven by service, software, technology, and competition, not only from competitors on your street, but around the world. You have the internet, social media, the sharing economy as these certain workforce drivers, as well as boomers and matures retiring by the tens of thousands or being forced to leave the workplace and now being replaced with younger, more tech savvy, more comfortable with collaborative work from college experience, millennials and Gen Zs. The Compassionate Organization, which was actually my second book, the Compassionate Organization understands the new worker model on effective work being driven by participation. So that's something that I've researched for years and really does empower organizations to overcome tremendously challenging circumstances and situations like we find ourselves in now in a global pandemic. The ability to have collaborative, participative working together will maximize the likelihood that your organization will achieve lasting competitive advantage. And self-leadership has nothing to do with those traditional levels of bureaucratic pyramid kind of command control. That's very 20th century. That model is dead and dying. In the 21st century, again, I started out today by saying collaboration is key. Because of the pace and the rate of transformational change due to technology, societal upheaval, we need employees to be empowered, to be in a position to navigate themselves through those chaotic times, through self-leadership. Self-leaders in your organization are empowered to define the work they do, own the work they do, set the priorities that they face day in, day out, and solve problems independently without interference from your leadership team and with complete blessing and support through getting what they need from your leadership team when they need it. And that's what self-directed teams and self-management is all about. We know, if you look through the bullet points, we know organizations across many different industries and sectors in the for-profit, the nonprofit realm, we know that self-directed teams is the de facto future of work in organizational dynamics. We know this. And as a result of the global pandemic and so many people being forced to or being permitted, depending on your vantage point, to work remotely, to work from home, has created a new dynamic. We know that nearly all employees are going to expect that their employer, after we see the light at the end of this tunnel of this global pandemic, employees are going to want more control over when they work remotely, how they work collaboratively, what they work on, when they're tasked with completing it. People are going to set their own boundaries. And organizations who are able to survive a global pandemic not only permit self-directed teams and people to be working autonomously, they're going to go out of their way to find employees who exhibit the qualities and characteristics that are needed to thrive in these kinds of chaotic, uncertain times by taking ownership of their own work. So in today's business world, where teams are in effect everywhere, you're going to have no choice as an organization but to create more democratic, participative organization that disperse control from the top, down, and out, inside your organization and out, for a truly 360-degree empowered democratic work organizational culture. And we know that teams have a certain construct. We know the size, we know the scope, and now you know the attributes and the stages of teams and virtual teams. That's going to be a part of doing business in the 21st century as a survival result or reality of a global pandemic. So we know this. The last piece I want to touch on with respect to teams is organizational demography, or what's referred to as diversity. We know We know that diversity is important, but everybody's throwing that word around. Come on. There's two types of diversity, and they're important and instructive when we think about what they are as far as silos of diverse and inclusive workplaces. One is what's called surface level. It's the obvious, it's the eye test. If I go to your website and look at About Us, your leadership team, are they all white, male, and 70 years old? The surface level is readily obvious apparent. Do you have or not have diversity? But then there's a deeper level diversity, and that goes beyond surface or the eye test. And deeper level is, where do your people come from? What's their upbringing? What's their culture? Language proficiency, their value constructs. Those are deeper level diversity. Do people truly feel like their voice matters? Or is that just lip service in your formal culture? Is that aspirational spin that your HR and leadership team gives? The degree and extent of diversity, inclusion, belonging is predicated on employee control over who they work with, how they work, what they work on, and where they're enabled to get their work done. That's control. And diversity is different perspectives, mindset, ideologies, philosophies. And that's harder to measure, finger on the pulse than the surface level. But that's what we refer to the deeper level as more meaningful diversity. And I thought it was important to just lay out those two parameters, the surface level and the deeper level. Team process. I mentioned before that there's the work itself and the how the work gets done. The common plan and purpose is you as an organization allowing teams to identify their team membership and creating, coaching, training a culture of leaders who they themselves understand how to articulate the purpose that the team that they're leading, the purpose of their mission. What are the goals that that team faces? Collaboratively, working together. They have to be specific, measurable, realistic, and you have to have systems and processes to measure goal completion rate. So those are called goal completion metrics. Team efficiency. The team has to believe they can succeed, or at that first stage, the forming, you will ultimately have a successful or unsuccessful venture on a team journey if the team doesn't think that they have that efficacy. If they don't believe they can succeed, they will not. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Mental models. Do you have, as part of your informal culture, a way to socialize or share what successful team dynamics looks like? Do you have models? Do you have examples that you include as part of your culture icons or the symbols that build employee feelings of ownership around their work and connectedness to your informal culture? Those are mental models. And conflict levels, let me just say it one last time. Most organizations fear conflict. It's unknown. It can upend your short and long-term strategic goals. Heck to the no. Conflict, when well managed, is a critically important way of creating diversity and inclusion and belonging by having all voices included and an effective way to facilitate an honest, open dialogue, even where and often when differences occur. So conflict is the gadfly of thought. It stirs us to observation and memory. It shocks us out of our sheep-like passivity and sets us at noting and contriving. Conflict is a synchronon of reflection and also ingenuity. So in other words, conflict is a trigger. When well managed, conflict is a spark that creates a flame that can burn down old systems, dysfunctional 20th century entities, and create a scorched earth that levels the playing field for which a fertile crop can then be planted. So we've talked enough about conflict. There are times when teamwork's not going to be desired, when you need to come to consensus quickly, when you have limited resources. Is it a scope of magnitude, this project that needs a team construct? Are the members that you're thinking of putting together, are they destined to work together well or maybe not work well? And does the work create a common sense of purpose? Because remember, the P in perform is a sense of purpose or shared mission. If the work cannot create that sense of purpose, you're doomed. So what does this all mean for managers? Well, first of all, managers are not what we want. It's a trick question. Management is 20th century. Management is control of people as assets. It's controlling people's performance, workflow. Management, whether it's the Latin mano a agere
or the French management is controlling, leading by the hand. It maps to micromanagement. You want, in lieu of management, you want leadership, sharing vision, hiring for best attributes. You want people who know the way, show the way, go the way. So management impact is, we know that individuals as part of a team, all teams share certain common characteristics, which you should now be, because of today, more enlightened to be on the lookout for characteristics of teams. Perform. Successful teams have phenomenal leadership. The leader is a member of their team, but oftentimes on a team of 8 to 12 individuals, you may have multiple people who organically gravitate towards leadership type of behavior. That also is an indication of a really strong organizational informal culture. People believe in each other on the team. They believe they can achieve the sense of purpose. They share the sense of purpose, and they move forward in that direction. And it's difficult to create effective teams, not just in your organization, but societally speaking, when we reward and have rewarded the individual's performance, at least in a Western individualist American culture, we reward individual performance. But the beauty of that is, since I teach in a college and universities, I've seen much more in academic institutions, the value now being emphasized and placed on group-based work, more so than ever before. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of people leaving academia and coming into the workforce in the 21st century who are more socialized to working collaboratively. Learn from each other as part of a team. Get rid of the barriers, and it's not just the leader's responsibility, it's every individual on the team. Help each other complete tasks, and those Bruce Wayne Tuckman 5 stages of, this is where you get to stage 4, highly functioning team. These are strategies. Reallocate work, job share, move people around so they have optimal exposure to different functional areas, departments, divisions, offices, locations. Move people around. My goodness, GE has been doing that for decades. The average size of teams today are 100 individuals. But we know that no more than 20 is desirable, ideally 8 to 12 in terms of team member composition. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Today, as part of my thank you for attending today's webinar, you're entitled to a free complimentary coaching session with me. So go to my website, thechazingroup.com, or email me at Ethan, E-T-H-A-N, at thechazingroup, C-H-A-Z-I-N group.com. Thank you.